I'm making this video to go into a bit more detail on how you square the fence on the sled to the fence on the saw, or the blade on the saw. I'm going to use the blade this time. And it's very easy. There's just one adjustment. That's what you have to do in the beginning. After you finish your sled, you put it on the saw, you make this adjustment, and then it's good to go. You'll have to check it every once in a while again, just to make sure it hasn't moved. But typically you're good forevermore, unless something happens to your saw. I've got the blade raised and I've got the fence set to 90 degrees. And here I can see that it's slightly out, so I need to adjust it. And the way to do that is you loosen the nut that holds the fence onto the pivot insert, and you rotate it slightly until it's square to the blade. Now, ideally, what this will result in is the outside face of the fence lined up with the dead center of that 1/8 inch hole in the pivot, because that's exactly how the scale was lined up. If it's very far off, that means that you put the scale in the wrong place when you built the sled, and you'll have to try to do it again. And you can see with mine that is exactly the center of that 1/8 inch hole. The thing to remember about this adjustment is that it's only meant to make up for a very small amount of inaccuracy. It's not going to work for something that's really far off. And then after you have it dialed in perfectly, it's not a bad idea to put a mark right there on the pivot insert to show where the fence lines up, so that if it ever changes over time, or if you need to readjust it quickly, you can just by lining it up with that mark. A nice thing about a miter saw is that it has detents that stop it at angles that you use very often. That's not a bad thing to do here, except instead of detents, you can do the same thing. Take your marking knife and make a mark outside of the scale to show where the fence would line up at that specific degree angle, so that you can quickly adjust it to it and not have to worry about looking at the scale and lining that up. Although doing that is fairly easy as well. And that's particularly handy for something like 22.5 degrees. You go to the trouble of getting that dialed in and then mark it on the sled base itself. And that way, the next time you need to cut it, you just rotate the fence up to that mark and lock it down.